in a deliberate attempt to terrorize her long-suffering husband. This is Meghan Markle's sickest stunt yet.
What if a single 10-second video could unravel an entire empire? For Meghan Markle, a late-night limo ride through Paris may have done just that. It wasn't just a video, it was a digital crime scene, and the evidence was damning. The stage was set for a triumphant return. Meghan was back in Europe for the first time since 2022, making a surprise, high-profile appearance at Paris Fashion Week. She attended the Balenciaga show to support its new creative director, a strategic move designed to cement her status as a global A-lister and fashion icon. This trip was a carefully orchestrated branding exercise, a declaration that Brand Sussex was still a powerhouse on the world stage. But then, in the dark of a Parisian night, she hit record. The Instagram story itself was deceptively simple.
Legs up as she went past the tunnel in which Diana Spencer was so tragically killed in Paris.
First, a shot of the glittering city lights from the window of her limousine as it passed the iconic Pont Alexandre III and Pont des Invalides bridges. Then the camera panned inside, revealing Meghan herself, relaxed, with her feet propped up on the seat, clad in a pair of black Balenciaga stilettos. It was a classic lifestyle post, a fleeting glimpse into a world of luxury and glamour. But it was the location that turned this casual clip into a global scandal. Her car was just a stone's throw from the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, the very place where her husband's mother, Princess Diana, lost her life in a horrific car crash on August 31, 1997. The backlash was not just swift, it was nuclear. The internet erupted with a fury that felt both personal and profound. Words like insensitive, tasteless, narcissistic, and disrespectful flooded social media platforms. This wasn't just criticism, it was a verdict. Netizens accused her of a level of cruelty that was hard to comprehend. One user on X wrote a comment that captured the raw nerve she had struck. Talk about purposely inflicting additional trauma and unnecessary PTSD on your husband. She's evil. Another condemned her lack of decorum, stating, "A so-called duchess is meant to show grace and class, not toss her feet on limo seats like she's at home on the couch. It's crude, entitled, and trashes every ounce of refinement she pretends to represent." The outrage was so intense that calls for King Charles to remove her Duchess title began to trend. Of course, a counter-narrative quickly emerged. A source close to the Sussexes insisted to reporters that Meghan had no idea the infamous underpass was nearby, dismissing the entire controversy as ridiculous and a tenuous link concocted by the very tabloids Harry despises. But the damage was done. Whether it was a malicious act or a moment of staggering ignorance, the impact was the same. What this single video truly exposed was a fatal flaw in their entire operation, a stunning failure to understand the very source of their own power. Meghan's global fame is inextricably linked to her marriage to a prince whose life story is defined by that singular tragedy. By treating the location of his mother's death as a casual backdrop for a lifestyle post, she demonstrated a shocking disregard for the emotional core of the very story that gives her relevance. It was more than just insensitive to Harry, it was a self-inflicted wound of the highest order, revealing that for Brand Sussex, the need to create content had superseded the sacred history the brand was built upon. And what happened next would suggest this was no mere accident. To the world, it was an insensitive video, but to Prince Harry, it was a desecration of sacred ground, because that tunnel in Paris isn't just a place on a map. It's the epicenter of a trauma that has haunted him his entire life. To understand the depth of this betrayal, you have to listen to Harry's own words. For years, he has spoken with raw honesty about the devastating impact of his mother's death. He confessed that he completely shut down all of my emotions for the last 20 years, a decision that had a quite serious effect on not only my personal life, but my work as well. He described his 20s as a period of total chaos, and admitted to being very close to a complete breakdown on numerous occasions as he struggled to cope with the unresolved grief. The Alma Tunnel holds a particularly dark significance for him. In his memoir, Spare, he recounts a harrowing visit to Paris in 2007, where he made a chilling request. He asked his driver to take him through that exact tunnel at 105 kilometers per hour, the same speed his mother's car was traveling at the moment of impact. He described the decision as a uniquely ill-conceived idea, a desperate attempt to find some kind of closure that only brought him face to face with the brutal finality of his loss. It was in that moment, speeding through the underpass, that the last flicker of a childhood hope that she might be in hiding was extinguished. As he wrote, "That was the night all doubt fell away. She's dead, I thought. My God, she's really gone for good." For Meghan to treat this site, the very place that confirmed his mother's death, as a casual photo op would be, In his eyes, unforgivable. His trauma isn't just about the crash itself, but the public spectacle that surrounded it. He remembers standing outside Kensington Palace as a 12-year-old boy, bewildered by the sea of weeping strangers. He described the bizarre feeling of being a middle person for their grief, collecting flowers from a public that was showing more emotion than he was allowed to. He recalled the funeral, the occasional wail and screaming, and the overwhelming silence as he walked behind her coffin. He has spent his entire adult life blaming the relentless pursuit of the paparazzi for his mother's death. His stated mission, the very justification for leaving the royal family, was to protect his own wife and children from a similar fate. This is why Meghan's video was not just a reminder of the past. It was a recreation of the very media circus that Harry holds responsible for his mother's death, with his own wife now in the director's chair. Her video, posted on a global social media platform for mass consumption, transformed a site of profound private trauma into a piece of public content. In doing so, she inadvertently mirrored the actions of the paparazzi she and Harry so often condemn, using Diana's tragedy as a backdrop for a public-facing image. For a man who sees the world through the lens of this specific trauma, this would feel like the ultimate betrayal. The person he sacrificed everything to protect was now, in his view, participating in the very culture of spectacle that he believes destroyed his mother. This wasn't just about insensitivity anymore. It was about a fundamental clash of values that would soon erupt with devastating force. The public backlash was deafening, but according to insiders, the real explosion happened behind closed doors. And for the first time, Harry's anger wasn't directed at the press or the palace. It was aimed squarely at his own wife. The fallout from the Paris video was not something that could be managed with a carefully worded press release. It struck at the very heart of Harry's identity and his deepest pain, and sources close to the couple claim his reaction was visceral and immediate. Royal expert Richard Fitzwilliams, speaking to the press, speculated on the prince's state of mind with chilling accuracy. "I suspect Harry will be horrified and extremely angry," he stated, predicting that Harry would be aghast at what he called a grossly insensitive mistake. Another expert was certain that while Harry is always supportive in public, he would be absolutely horrified and that Meghan could hear plenty from him about it in private. The confrontation, as pieced together from insider accounts, was reportedly a brutal clash of two completely different worldviews. Harry, consumed by the reopening of his deepest wound, allegedly demanded to know how she could do something so thoughtless, so callous, especially given the sacred meaning that location held for him. Her response, according to witnesses, was to brush it off. She insisted it was harmless, that it was just a clip, just content. But for Harry, those words were the ultimate insult. His mother's death, his lifelong trauma, his sacred ground, reduced to mere content for an Instagram story. In that moment, it wasn't just a disagreement, it was a betrayal. The chasm between content and betrayal became the new explosive fault line in their relationship. This argument reportedly marked a profound and dangerous turning point for the couple. Insiders claim that something inside Harry shifted after Paris. The man who had famously stood against his own family, his country, and the institution he was born into, all to protect Meghan, had finally reached his limit. He reportedly stopped defending her behind closed doors. The dynamic that had defined their public identity, Harry the protector and Meghan the protected, began to crumble. The tension that they had so successfully projected onto the outside world was now living inside their own home. The man who once saw his wife as the victim of a cruel system now allegedly saw her as the perpetrator of his own pain. He was quietly, but decisively, pulling away from her. This explosive argument reveals a fundamental disconnect that their post-royal careers have only made worse. Meghan's alleged defense of the video as just content reflects the pragmatic mindset of an entrepreneur and media personality, someone focused on brand building, engagement, and the constant need to feed the content machine. From this perspective, all experiences, even tragic ones, are potential assets that can be leveraged for the brand. Harry's reaction, however, stems from a worldview defined by trauma, where certain lines are sacred and can never be crossed, especially not for commercial gain. Their life in California has forced these two opposing views into direct conflict. To maintain their lifestyle, they must produce content. But the only content that has proven to be a blockbuster success is their personal story of trauma and royal conflict. The Paris incident was the moment this inherent tension became unsustainable. Meghan's attempt to create lifestyle content collided with the raw, unmarketable trauma at the heart of Harry's story, and the result was an explosion that may have shattered the foundations of their fairy tale. But the Paris video wasn't a random misstep. It was a symptom of a much larger problem, a sign of the mounting pressure on a brand that was beginning to falter. To understand the desperation that might lead to such a catastrophic error in judgment, you have to look at the string of rejections and humiliations that came before it, starting with the deeply embarrassing saga of the Duchess of Dior. For a moment, it seemed like the perfect comeback story. Following the collapse of their lucrative Spotify deal, rumors began to swirl that Meghan was on the verge of a massive multi-million-dollar contract to become a new brand ambassador for the legendary fashion house Dior. This wasn't just any brand deal. It was a stylish coup that would more than make up for the Spotify failure and solidify Meghan's place among the global elite, alongside existing Dior faces like Jennifer Lawrence and Natalie Portman. The connection was also deeply personal and strategic. Dior was a favorite brand of Princess Diana, and the company had famously renamed one of its most iconic handbags the Lady Dior in her honor. For Meghan, becoming the Duchess of Dior would be the ultimate validation, a symbolic inheritance of Diana's mantle as a global fashion icon. Her new Hollywood agency was reportedly working for weeks on a rebranding of Meghan, and this Dior deal was meant to be the glittering centerpiece. Then came the public shutdown. In a move that was as swift as it was brutal, Dior itself stepped in to extinguish the rumors. A spokesperson for the brand in Paris gave a statement to the respected fashion publication Women's Wear Daily, declaring that the reports were completely unfounded and, in a particularly cutting detail, stressed that there had been no contract negotiations or recent contact with Markle. It was a blunt, unequivocal, and public rejection. The brand wasn't just denying a rumor, it was actively distancing itself from the Duchess of Sussex. To add a final humiliating twist to the story, on the very same day that Dior issued its public denial, a different royal was making headlines for her association with the brand. Queen Camilla made a high-profile appearance at the first day of Royal Ascot, dressed head to toe in an elegant, custom-made white Dior ensemble. The visual contrast was impossible to miss and sent a powerful message. Dior, a brand built on heritage and stability, was publicly aligning itself with the established drama-free monarchy, not the controversial Sussexes. This rejection signaled a critical failure in Meghan's strategy. Luxury brands crave stability and positive association, two things that Brand Sussex, with its entire identity built on controversy, disruption, and a narrative of grievance, simply cannot provide. High fashion houses are in the business of selling an aspirational dream, not a polarizing drama. The Dior debacle was a harsh lesson for Meghan. Her core brand identity as the royal rebel was fundamentally incompatible with the very A-list corporate partnerships she needed to fund her ambitions. She was trying to sell a product controversy to buyers who were in the market for the exact opposite. A rejection from a fashion house is one thing, but what happens when the entire Hollywood machine starts to turn against you? For Harry and Meghan, the dream of becoming media moguls was about to collide with a harsh reality, and a single brutal word: grifters. Their post-royal life was supposed to be financed by a series of massive media deals, with the cornerstones being a reported $20 million contract with Spotify and a staggering $100 million deal with Netflix. These weren't just passion projects, they were the financial foundation of their independence, but that foundation was beginning to crumble. The first major crack appeared when their Spotify deal imploded. After 2.5 years, the couple had produced only one 12-episode series of Meghan's podcast, Archetypes. In June 2023, Spotify and the Sussexes' production company Arkwell Audio released a joint statement saying they had mutually agreed to part ways. But sources close to the streaming giant told a different story. They claimed the royal couple had failed to meet the productivity benchmark required to receive their full $20 million payout. The partnership didn't just end, it failed. The fallout was immediate and vicious. Bill Simmons, Spotify's head of podcast innovation and monetization, and a major industry player, went on his own podcast and delivered a devastating public verdict. "The effing grifters. That's the podcast we should have launched with them," he fumed. "I have got to get drunk one night and tell the story of the Zoom I had with Harry to try and help him with a podcast idea. It's one of my best stories. F-fick them. The grifters." The comment was a bombshell. The word grifters, implying they were con artists who took money without providing real value, stuck to them like glue. It wasn't just an insult, it was an indictment from the heart of the industry they were trying to conquer. With the Spotify dream in ashes, all eyes turned to their even bigger deal with Netflix, and the signs of trouble were everywhere. An animated series from Meghan called Pearl was unceremoniously canned by the streamer amid cutbacks. The trailers for their blockbuster docuseries, Harry and Meghan, were found to have used misleading stock footage of paparazzi swarming other celebrities to illustrate their own plight. And while that initial series was a ratings hit, subsequent projects have failed to capture the same magic. The question is, what happens when the man who sacrificed everything realizes the person he did it for may not understand the true cost of that sacrifice? Can a love born from rebellion survive the quiet, creeping resentment of regret? The ending to this story hasn't been written yet, but for the first time, it feels like the final chapter is approaching, and it may not be the one anyone expected.